Morning everyone, it's Mrs. Florenza. Okay, so it's the end of the holidays and I hope you've all had a good one and you've had a nice relaxing time and hope you're ready for the new term. So if you remember at the end of last term, the last lesson on Google Classroom, I said that we need to finish off the section on the history of life on Earth. We then have to do a small section on fossils as well. Okay, so history of life on Earth, it starts on page 172 to 181. And then there's a section on fossils. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint with you. I'm going to do it in 2 videos, also if it becomes too long, the file gets too big. I will stop halfway and then I will start making another video. All right, so let's just share screen. There's the PowerPoint and there we go. Now, this section, the textbook is actually very good. Okay, that's what this is based on. It's a story. It's a story of how researchers and scientists think that how Earth came about, how different things have changed, like the ice ages, extinction, speciation, level of oxygen, all those kinds of things. And they get that information by looking at different layers in the Earth and the fossils that are found, and that's what you really need to understand. So there are some nice videos. The links are at the end of the PowerPoint, and then there are also links on Google Classroom. And they are really, really nice to watch. They're short videos, and they give a very good idea of what this is all about. So for my first slide, for my opening slide, I chose this beautiful painting. And the reason why I chose it is because it actually shows what scientists think happened to Earth in the history of time over millions of years. So it shows the history of life on Earth. I'm just going to go through this with you. On the left over here is earliest Earth. Okay, so if you think of all these dust and gases that condensed and cooled, and then there was volcanic action and all sorts of things. I'm sure the geographers would know more about that. So you had this ball of dust condensing and lots of volcanic action, right? With many very hot and lots of volcanoes, and that's ancient Earth, all right? And then later, then the oceans developed, all right? And they believe that the very simple first organisms, or at least the first molecules of life formed in them. So you can see here are water molecules, and then there's some amino acids, and then DNA, and then you get the formation of simple organisms, almost like bacteria, becoming more complex organisms, which then evolve and move out onto land. All right, so the water in the ocean, that's where carbon was found. Okay, so that's why amino acids could be, molecules could join, and amino acids or atoms could join, and amino acids were formed, and other molecules. But there was enough carbon, and we know that carbon from term 1, we know that carbon is the backbone of proteins and carbs and lipids and so on. All right, so that's how life molecules, the molecules that we learned about in term 1, came about. The Earth cooled down, and then these molecules organized into more complicated structures like DNA and RNA and proteins, and they accumulated, and somehow simple life started, all right? And that was about 3.9 to just under 1 billion years ago, okay? And they postulate that the earliest living things, or one of the earliest living things, were algae. So some of these bacteria, they were able to photosynthesize, and they started producing oxygen. Now, in the beginning, there was no oxygen. So the organisms that were around then, we say that they are anaerobic. They can't use oxygen. But then when oxygen was produced by simple algae, then, oxygen became more common, and it's actually toxic. I mean, we know what oxygen does to metal. You put metal outside in the rain, and there's oxygen, it starts to rust. So a lot of organisms that were around initially, they were not able to use oxygen. But then when oxygen became the predominant gas, it caused a lot of problems. And then oxygen-using organisms like us and other simple organisms evolved. We are aerobic, and a lot of the anaerobic bacteria, the first organisms, would have died out. That I'll show you on the next slide. All right, so further right of this painting, that means closer to today. The complicated multicellular life forms exist. So things like jellyfish and snails, and we'll talk about trilobites, and they are fossilized invertebrates, and then the fish and so on. And then organisms changed, and the land became available, and organisms moved onto land, and they became adapted to living on land. about 0.4, half a billion years ago. And then we started seeing trees and dinosaurs and eventually mammals and so on and so on. And finally, human beings. All right, so if you watch the videos, it will give you a good idea of this as well. Now, I always think of this if you go to Marrakech, and before you get on those little boats, right? If you walk down on the right-hand wall, they've got all these pictures. They've got a timeline, geological timeline from the time that Earth began 4.6 billion years ago, and then they show you. The first thing is simple molecules, simple atoms, then molecules, then amino acids, then simple bacteria, then photosynthetic bacteria, and it gives you that whole timeline as you walk down towards, to get on the boat. Okay, so this is the summary. All right, so we do believe that the Earth began 4.6 billion years ago, or 4,600 million years ago. It was inhospitable because there were lots of toxic gases. Okay, it was much hotter than now because of all the volcanoes, but then it started to cool and water condensed, the vapor condensed to form liquid, and then you got the oceans being formed, and then simple single-celled bacteria, similar to the ones that we find in hot springs today. Now, they're called archaebacteria. So they're very ancient. They haven't changed much over time, and they are still adapted to living in hot springs, like where there's sulfur and other noxious gases. And so those are some of the bacteria from way back when, millions of years ago, that are still alive today. But then we now have the aerobic bacteria, the ones that are able to use oxygen. All right. So bacteria, if you remember, are prokaryotic. So they don't have true nuclei. They've got that, circular ring of DNA suspended in the cytoplasm. So they are prokaryotes. And then the first eukaryotic organisms arose, but only about 1,000 million years ago. And then we started getting accumulation of cells, the first simple eukaryotes, and then accumulation to form multicellular organisms, soft-bodied organisms, and all the major phyla are said to have arisen in a time period known as the Cambrian Explosion. And I'll show you a bit about that later. Okay, so that was only 540 million years ago. And then since then, life has evolved gradually. We're talking about millions of years. It's very difficult to comprehend that amount of time. And we have the biodiversity that we see today. Okay. All right, so here's another diagram. So the early Earth's atmosphere was definitely not like it is today. There was hydrogen, there was lots of methane and ammonia. If you think of Handy Andy, much stronger, that smell, nitrogen gases. It was very noxious, toxic. It would be toxic to us now if there was too much of this. And lighting provided the energy for these gases to fuse, and then you got the formation of something like amino acids. And if you remember amino acids, it's hydrogen and carbon, oxygen and nitrogen. And then those amino acids would have collided to form protein molecules and proteins and DNA, and everything else would have eventually somehow combined to form the first living cell. So I remember when I was at varsity in my first year, they made us do this philosophy, or not made us, it was actually very interesting, the philosophy of science course. And the one thing that I remember them telling us about is Miller's experiment. Now, in 1953, he was so determined to try and figure out how amino acids could form from nothing, from gases. And he set up this experiment. You can see his apparatus there. So basically, he put chemicals that were supposed to be found in the primordial, the first oceans. All right, so there they are. And just like there were lots of volcanoes, it was heated up, and then that vapor was then condensed, and there were other gases. And then he supplied sparks, which simulated lightning, and then these molecules actually combined. He said they combined and cooled to form amino acids, and that's how he said that the first organic molecules were produced. And you can go and read up on him. Okay, so then in our book on page 173, it explains it very nicely. So if there's change in the Earth's atmosphere, change in the different types of gases, there must be changes in climate as well, and temperature, etc. All right, so over time, well, first there was a very hot Earth, and then the climate cooled down, and we had ice ages, and then the climate warmed, and we had warm periods, and so on and so on. And the most recent ice age was the one where the woolly mammoths roamed the earth, and they were very well insulated. They had these thick fur coats, and smaller dwarf elephants. Okay, they lived in warmer areas, and they were hairless. They didn't need all that insulation. Okay, and now when ice ages, or when ice freezes, okay, when the seas get covered by these growing sheets of ice, when ice freezes, there's less water left behind, if you know what I mean. So the sea levels drop. So if the sea levels dropped, then the animals that were living in the shallow regions, they would have died out because the sea levels have dropped. Okay, so they became extinct. But swampy coastline habitats would have increased, and then now there's new niches for other organisms to start evolving. And then the continents might, because the sea levels drop, then continents become or are joined now by land bridges, and that could allow movement of organisms between different continents. So I just there's a similar graph on page 173 to show how the climate has changed. Well, this one shows temperature. So temperature change in degrees C. We can see that there's the increases in temperature and decreases. It's a natural cycle, all right? And cosmic rays. Now, I know when they talk about Mars, or if you go out into space, the reason why we wear those space suits with the very, the visors which reflect rays, that's cosmic rays, because that can actually do more damage. All right, so temperature has changed over time, over millions of years as well. All right, and if temperature changes, you get ice ages. So that's one of my favorite movies. And they're said to occur about every 150 million years, and they last for about 1 million years. All right, and we've got a current warm period, and they say it's going to end with another cold phase, leading to another ice age, but only in 23,000 years' time. So I think we're safe for now. All right, so the geologists, by looking at different layers in the earth, they can work out that there have been, they propose that there have been 5 major ice ages. We don't need to know about them, but here they are, and they've been given different names. Okay. All right, so now there's also changes in oxygen levels, and if you look at page 174, there's some information about that, so you can go and read that. So can you remember what the percentage of oxygen is in our atmosphere today? Okay, we talked about it, we did it in grade 9. Remember? Okay, it's about 21%, and that's what we've become adapted to. So we aerobic organisms, but way back when, there was no oxygen. Early Earth, all those volcanoes, there were all those noxious gases like ammonia and methane and hydrogen. There was no oxygen, okay? Then about 2,500 MYA, millions of years ago, that is a proper unit. So you can definitely use that. That's when new bacterial organisms appeared, and they were photosynthetic, so they produce oxygen. So then it became an oxygen-rich environment over millions of years, and that caused many of the ancient forms of bacteria, the archaic bacteria, to die out. And obviously some of them did not die out. They still live in sulfur springs today, as I said before. But these new bacteria, they could live in an oxygen-rich environment, and cellular respiration arose. We had photosynthetic ones. They could also break down their own food, and other bacteria which could feed on these photosynthetic bacteria and break down the food using cellular respiration. So simple life things. All right, and with the release of oxygen, the ozone layer, that protective layer around the Earth that prevents too much UV radiation from coming in, that would have formed as well. So UV rays would have split some of the oxygen molecules into single oxygen atoms, and then those would combine with other oxygen atoms to form O3, which is ozone. And we now have that protective blanket, that shield around the Earth, okay, which it's a natural greenhouse effect. We need warming of the Earth in order to have photosynthesis and life as we know it. All right. Okay, so basically, then the oceans, life could have moved out of the water and onto the land surface, because now it was safer for organisms to live on land. There were less UV rays. All right, so similar to the graph on page 174, there's a graph showing the changing oxygen content of the Earth's atmosphere, the percentage, and how it's changed over millions of years. So we're at about 21% now, And you can see here, you know, 1,000 million years ago, it was very low, and before that there was no oxygen, and then oxygen levels increased, and so on and so on. I'm just going to let the dogs out. Okay, I'm back. All right, so you can see over here that at one stage the Earth's atmosphere was 35% oxygen. Okay, that was round about, if you read that, about 300 million years ago, and they found fossils of dragonflies that had 70-meter wingspans and spiders that were the size of dinner plates, because if there's more oxygen, you can grow faster. Metabolism is higher. All right, so that's a little bit about changes in oxygen levels. Then, if you've watched the videos, you will see on page 175 about geological events, things like earthquakes and volcanoes, and you know that the continents are constantly moving, okay? So continental drift, and they're still moving today, something like a centimeter every year. Geographers, you can help me out there. So 250 million years ago, there was one huge landmass, and it was called Pangaea. And then it started to break up, you know, the continents shift, all right? The tectonic plate, okay? And the top part is known as Eurasia, because Asia is, I always remember Asia is at the top in the northern hemisphere, and Gondwana is at the bottom, and that became part of the southern hemisphere, all right, or the southern continent. And these broke up about 65 million years ago, and eventually you've got the 7 continents that are in their current position. And if you watch the one video, you can see how the continents broke up, and they say that in millions of years in the future that they're going to go back to, well, that's what they say. Okay, that's what the tectonic plates and research on them has led these scientists to say. All right, so here's Pangaea, then there's Eurasia, then there's Gondwana land, and about 135 million years ago, they're separating until we can see the continents as they are today. And there's a video you can go and watch there. All right, so if you think about it, if all the continents were joined, it means that a lot of the, like the bottom part of Africa, this region of South America, the lower part of India, etc., they were once under ice. So the animals, or the organisms that were found there, were adapted to very cold habitats. But now, as the continents start moving, you know, different organisms are going to evolve. So animals, you know, some animals, plants became extinct, and other ones would have evolved in order to cope with the new niches, the warmer niches. And when continents were joined like this, you know, they could move from one continent to the next. And that kind of shows us today, you know, why we have similar organisms in South America and Africa and even Australia, that there must have been a common ancestor way back when the continents were still joined, and then as the continents separated, those organisms evolved, you know, by themselves, and we now have related organisms found on these different continents. So examples of this, so we call this evidence for continental drift. Okay, if we think of proteas, now proteas are indigenous to some, you know, proteas are indigenous to South Africa. Like if you think of the Fynbos region, there's proteas in South America, there's proteas in Australia. Some of them are only found in South Africa, so not only are they indigenous, remember from ecology, they're also endemic. But there are some proteas that are found in these different continents. So that shows that there must have been a common ancestor when the continents were still linked. Okay, so that's the proteas. Then there's also examples like if you look at certain animals, like the large flightless birds, they're actually called the ratites. We deal with this a little bit in grade 12 as well. So they postulate that the emu from South America and the smaller rhea from Australia and the ostrich from our own continent, that they evolved from a common ancestor when the continents were still a part of Pangaea. And then as the continents separated, then they evolved in their own way, okay, on each continent, but they still relate, okay? All right, so there, just to have a little bit of a break. Okay, obviously you know that continental drift, you know, happens very slowly, millions of years. It's really difficult to comprehend. All right, so on page 176, okay, there's a little section on biogeography. So that makes sense. It's bio, it's the distribution of organisms, of animals and plants on land. Okay, geographical distribution of animals and plants. So that's what scientists look at. They look at, where were organisms found millions of years ago. They look at the fossils, where they found now. They compare them. They see, the similarities, the differences, to try and work out how the distribution pattern of organisms have changed in geological time and where they arose, like the ostriches and proteus. Okay, so what's really interesting is that they found fossils of marine, of oceanic organisms on land. So that means that millions of years ago, that area was once land. Sorry, it was once an ocean and it is now land. It was once covered by an ocean. This is quite strange. They found fossils of extinct whales in Egypt. Now, in KwaZulu itself, you get a lot of ammonite fossils, and that can be found in many different places of the world. And that shows, that these organisms have been around for a really, really long time, and they are found inland. So that region used to be an ocean. And these little trilobites over here, well, they can be small, to about 70 centimeters, in different species. And lots of fossils of them have been found in the Karoo, which is a desert. So that shows that the Karoo was once an inland ocean or an inland sea. I've actually got some examples of these in my lab. So when we get back, I'm going to show you. All right, so here's some more photographs. There's an ammonite, and that's what it would have looked like. Okay. And here's trilobites, and they used to scurry along and feed on all the debris at the bottom of the ocean. Almost like insects of the ocean. Okay, so we now need to figure out, so when did these organisms live? How many millions of years were they around for? So, excuse me, we start looking at something called Geological Timescale. And if I just hold up the textbook, page 177, you can see there's an example of a geological timescale. It's something that you read off. It's not something that you go and learn off by heart. Okay, that would be crazy. So because scientists have found fossils in rocks, and in different regions, they found similar fossils in those layers of rocks in the mountain, and similar fossils in another, same layer of rock in another mountain. So they can work out, where these organisms were and, how long ago they actually lived. Okay, so if you think about it, the sand gets deposited all the time and it becomes rock, new rock, new rock, new rock. So the oldest fossils will always be found in the deepest parts of the earth. I mean, as you go through the different rock layers, younger and younger fossils will be found nearer to the surface. Okay. The oldest reptile fossils, for example, will be found in deeper rocks than the fossils of the mammals, because mammals are more advanced. They will be found close to the surface of the earth. All right. So this is the same kind of diagram that's on page 177. So this kind of diagram was developed in the 1830s. Okay, so they used to look at layers of rock and look at the fossils and then compare different layers in different regions and then try and figure out how long ago the organisms lived. And this was before we could actually work out the exact, or within a few million years, the age of rocks by something known as radiometric dating. Okay, so if you look here, let's just see here now, layers of rock from each era. So looking at the layers of rock, and then they can more or less work out how many millions of years ago those rock layers were formed. And then if you look here, we are currently in the Quaternary period, all right, in the Cenozoic era. So that's the most recent one. And if you go further and further down, they have divided the geological timescale into different periods and eras and so on. If you go all the way back, okay, here we've got the Cambrian period with a little trilobites. And if you go through here, you can see giant insects. So there was lots of oxygen, and that was about from 320 million years ago to 290 million years ago. So they were around for about 30 million years. You can see here the dinosaurs. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the words Triassic and Jurassic and the Cretaceous. And then you start getting the evolution of the first mammals. All right, and that was about 65 million years ago. So that's how you always need to look at, so what So how must I read this diagram? So this refers to how many millions of years ago, when they originated or when they thought to have originated, when they became extinct, and so on and so on. And all this information is obtained by looking at the fossil record. Okay, so here's another geological timescale. So here it shows the beginning of Earth, 4.6 billion years or 4,600 million years ago. Okay, there's the unit at the top. So there's a big zigzag line over here, and I'm sure you know what that means, because 4,600 million years ago to 700 million years, that's a big gap. So they haven't drawn the whole graph. It's like having a split scale on a graph. So the first invertebrates only arose 700 million years ago. So there was a long time when there weren't many organisms. And then if you look here, the first fish arose about 505 million years ago. It's like between the Cambrian and the Ordovician period. And that's how you read, okay? The first land plants in the Ordovician as well. And you've got to sort of estimate how many millions of years ago. So it's sort of in the middle here, if you take that as what it says. So it's halfway between 438 and 504, which is about 470 million years ago. And the first reptiles a little bit earlier than 360 million years ago. And the first dinosaurs over here, and so on and so on. And the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, and that's when lots of mammals could occupy all these niches that were left behind by the dinosaurs. And we are currently in the Quaternary period, in the Cenozoic era, which is like the last. If you had to put all of this into 24 hours, we've been around for like a couple of seconds. So there's a nice video on that as well. Okay, so here's another diagram. So from 4,600 million years ago, the beginning of the Earth, microfossils were found 3,500 million years ago in Western Australia. So it's quite hard for bacteria to fossilize because they don't have any hard parts, but they have found these fossilized bacteria in Western Australia, and we know that oxygen was produced by simple unicellular bacteria-like organisms that we photosynthesize round about 1,700 million years ago. And then they've taken this portion and they've expanded it. So we've got the Precambrian, the Cambrian, etc., the Triassic, the Jurassic. These are the different eras, and then we are now in the Quaternary period. So you just got to look at the scale. Some people say, if I said to them, okay, when did the Triassic era start? Yeah. So then they tell me 150 million years ago. No, that's over there. Between 200 and 300. So it looks, it's not halfway. So it looks, that would be 250 million years ago, maybe 240, 235 million years ago. Okay, so here's another diagram which I really like. It's also based on fossil evidence. So it's based on the fossils that scientists have found. Now, not everything fossilized. You've got to usually have hard structures like bone in order to fossilize, like shells and things like that. So there is an incomplete fossil record, and as more and more fossils are found, then we find out more information about early life on Earth. All right. So if we look here, we can more or less see which organisms have been around for the longest time. So we can see that bacteria, algae, protists like amoeba, paramecium, glena, all the fungi have been around much longer than the land plants and the invertebrates. So they haven't extended the graph over here. All right, so they've been around, just see what it says here. They extend way back, even, pre-Cambrian. All right, invertebrate groups, it says here they extend back to the Cambrian period, or even the early, or the late, Proterozoic. All right, so the oldest vertebrates would be the cnidarians, things like jellyfish. Cnidaria means that they've got these little stinging cells that pop out, and then they catch the prey, and then they can catch the food like that. Starfish, whoops, let's just go back. Starfish have been around quite a long time. Those are echinoderms. The most recent ones are the flatworms. They're called Pangaea. Insecta, so butterflies and bees and flies and mosquitoes. They've been around since the Silurian. All right, the Silurian period, and you can read it off like that, right? Crustaceans, things like crabs and lobsters, they've been around since near the beginning of the Cambrian, so that's about 540 million years ago. And then the first land plants, okay, so the fern-like plants, the early ones, they arose, land plants we're talking about now, not the ones that the algae that are in the ocean. So they arose up in the Devonian period. Conifers are much older, so cone-bearing plants like pine trees, that whole family of plants, they arose much earlier than the flowering plants. So you know, the old ancient forests they had conifer type plants that produced cones. Cycads as well, also older than flowering plants. And these are flowering plants. These are angiosperms. The flowering plants are the most recent. And basically a flower, if you think of the leaves on a branch, what happened is that some of the leaves became modified, they changed color, they changed structure, and then you get all the different parts of the flower, the sepals, the petals, the male and female organs on the inside, which produce the pollen and the ovules. So that's how they say that flowering plants or angiosperms came about. All right, then let's look at the vertebrates. So the chordates, things that have got a nerve cord. So I remember when I was studying at varsity, they taught us about these tunicates, sea squirts. So it's like a strange animal, they're still around today. So anything that touches this line, you can see they're still around today. And they've got a siphon, and they suck in water to one side, and then the food goes through, and they filter feed, and then they push out the water through the other side. But along the one wall, they've actually got a very simple nerve cord, and it's called a notochord. So in more developed organisms like fish and amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, that nerve cord became what we now know as our spinal cord, and it's surrounded by the vertebral column. So those were the very early chordates, all right, with a simple type of, well, not a vertebral column, but they have this nerve cord. And you can see here that sharks and rays, they are, cartilaginous fish. They are very, very old, all right? And ray fin fish, so that would be the bony, the fish that we know today, like goldfish and trout and things like that, where their fins, thin little bones, okay, with membranes in between. Then we've got the amphibia. Now, amphibian means amphibios, dual life. So we know that tadpoles live in water and they can move onto land. Obviously, there's some frogs that never get out of the water, but these are animals that can move from water to land, some of them. And then you get the reptiles. So as land became available, these organisms developed scales to protect them from drying out on land. So they are more advanced. Squamata are the lizards and the snakes. And birds, they are more recent. They're actually older than, if you look there, older than crocodiles. All right, and crocodiles are slightly more recent. And our feathered friends are more recent. But then if you go down, the monotremes, like the duck-billed platypus, they are more ancient than the kangaroos and the placentals. So marsupials are the kangaroos. So it's almost like there was experimentation with different kinds of reproduction. So we know that fish lay eggs. Some of them, the eggs are in the water. Some of them are kept inside, and the eggs hatch inside. The same with frogs lay eggs. Turtles, crocs, etc. lay eggs. Birds lay eggs. Then you get the duck-billed platypus, which is a mammal that lays eggs. So it's almost like it was an in-between. And then you get the marsupials, which is now there's no egg laying, but the babies are born very small. You think of little kangaroos, little joeys, and they are inside the pouch of the mother and they suckle milk. So that's the first example of placental mammals. Okay, so they originally attached to the placenta, and then it was born this tiny little joey, and then it suckled milk. And then you've got that's not the marsupial. Okay? Then you get the proper placentals, where the young are kept inside the womb, attached by an umbilical cord to the mother's womb, and they fed for a much longer time and born much later on. So they're more developed when they're actually born compared to little kangaroos, joeys. All right, so you can see more or less that placental mammals like ourselves and cats and dogs and cows arose about 100, maybe 20 million years ago. All right, so If you remember from an earlier slide, so there's been changes in number of species over time, and they talk about the Cambrian Explosion about 540 million years ago. And if you look, if scientists looked at all the fossils that were found in those layers of rocks, they saw that there were suddenly huge amounts of different kinds of fossils. It's sometimes called the Cambrian Explosion, which happened in the Cambrian period, and it happened, speciation and production of new organisms doesn't just happen in a few years. They say it took about 10 million years for all these new organisms to evolve. And that's when most of the animal groups appeared, like what I showed you in the previous slide, the birds, the fish, the reptiles, etc. So it's the highest rate of speciation. And speciation is the opposite, obviously, of extinction. So speciation is natural, increase in number of species, and extinction is natural, because it depends on what happens on Earth over time. All right, so they say in the Cambrian period there were lots of organisms with shells and skeletons, bony skeletons appeared, and things like sponges, little animals, little unicellular animals that live in a calcium carbonate, shell, well, not shell, but like calcium carbonate ground material that they live in. You've got all the jellyfish with their stem cells and worms, and arthropods are all the insects, and at that time the trilobites and primitive fish, the earliest fish, the ones with backbones, okay? And they think that near the end of the Cambrian period, well, they know that a lot of trilobites became extinct. All right, so there's a lovely diagram, a painting showing all these new organisms, lots of diversity of life that arose during the Cambrian period. Now, this is called a kite graph, okay? So you've got the different periods over here and the different eras. So this is the most recent era over here, okay? So these organisms are still alive. Now, the width of the kite graph shows how many organisms are present. So if we look here today, there are lots of mollusks, lots of arthropods, there are some starfish and things like that, and there are lots of backboned animals like the birds and the reptiles and amphibians and mammals. Okay, we can also see that the mollusks evolved in the Cambrian period, and the arthropods with jointed legs, things like trilobites, insects, and later on starfish arose around about there. There's no timeline here, but we can just see which organisms arose first, and we can see, when they nearly went extinct, and then there was, again, the graph actually expanded sideways, showing that there were more organisms. So this is all based on fossil evidence, and you can see how the number of organisms in each of these groups has changed over time. So you might get a graph like that too. All right. I'm just going to do this. In fact, I'm going to stop here now, and then I'm going to make another video on